to be truly human-centered, first and foremost, we need to be earth-centered, because earth-centered is indirectly human-centered.
Welcome to Transcend Matter. This podcast aims to explore the fascinating interplay of materials that not only redefine aesthetics, but address pressing human and environmental challenges. Every episode is brought to you by me, Emma Wright, a material developer and researcher, to converse with material experts from either an academic, designer, or research background. We'll be diving into their practice, exploring cross-collaboration and their connection with materials. Welcome everyone to another amazing episode. Well, I mean, I find them amazing. I love recording them. So I hope you find them amazing to listen to. Today, I welcome on Transcend Matter, Hannah Elisabeth Jones. I first met Hannah at the Royal College of Art, where I'm very, very grateful that a lot of my connections in the Royal College of Art allowed that space for me to connect to some amazing people. Hannah Elisabeth Jones is a fantastic hybrid designer and artist who is very much planet-centric focused in her work. She's currently studying a PhD in sort of biomaterial orientation products, developments and LCAs that she'll go into a lot deeper shortly at the University of Manchester. I first kind of got into contact with Hannah again, yes, at the RCA, but through her beautiful work and also her amazing storytelling of whatever project she is diving into, whether it's looking at seasonal colors in natural dyes, through her amazing material innovations, the bio-marbled papers and the structures and art pieces she's created. She, for me personally, has a very holistic approach to her work. She's very mindful of the environment and where her materials come from, and has a very strong identity and personal interpretation of how biomaterials and natural life cycles can really inspire the next generation of products, not certainly just in textiles, but also in interiors and maybe other things like automotives, etc. So she is a fantastic speaker, and I hope you really enjoy your time listening to her. So, yes, one more thing before I forget. We were talking about scholarships during the episode, and I completely forgot who I got funded for at the RCA, which is terrible of me. Absolutely terrible. I blame my dyslexic brain, even though I shouldn't really, but I do. And I just want to say, let's put into small details here. Thank you, Coates Foundation Trust Bursary, for helping me get through my MA. I really, really appreciate it. I really, really do. Anyway, on with the recording and enjoy. Thank you. How's uni going? Have you got a break coming up with Easter soon?
Yeah, it's going all right, thank you. The breaks for when you're a PhD student are different, because obviously it's not quite this. You can't take as much time off. I would love to take that much time off, but
Yeah.
I think I'll have the bank holiday weekend hopefully off.
Yeah,
I think. What about you? How's work?
We just have the bank holidays really. Yeah, work's pretty crazy at the minute. I've got to go to Munich in a week and a half.
Oh,
so
nice.
For work.
What
yeah. It's like a big trade show for like big performance fabrics and specialist fabrics, I guess you could say. And there's also quite a lot of clients who I work with in Europe also come to Munich. So it's quite nice to kind of see what's new innovations that are going on, and then also chat to people in real life opposed to on emails about particular projects you're working on.
Yeah, definitely.
So, man, it's so much easier. And I'm dyslexic, so like email ping pong is not, my brain's like, no, don't do it.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation.
No. Yeah.
It's so true. Do you guys get the summer off then as well?
No, not really. It's the same as if you are working for a job. Yeah, so you have to book it off as well. You have to book off your days with your supervisor and just check that it's all going to be okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a full-time job. Yeah, and I have a a scholarship as well. So yeah, it is a job. It literally is a job.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because you
it's
need to
good.
show like you're into your deliverables, I'm guessing, for your
Exactly.
scholarship.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and actually doing what I said I was going to do.
Yeah, yeah, completely. Nice.
Yeah,
Well,
but yeah.
thank you so much for joining me today. This is
Thank you for having me.
wonderful. Of course. I've always appreciated your work from RCA and afterwards. So
Oh,
I thought,
likewise, likewise.
oh, that's very kind. Thank you. So yeah, I would just love to know where you are at right now, because I feel for everyone who's listening, they will obviously see the blurb about your previous work and your current work. So I didn't know if you want to kind of give like a nice little overview, maybe pre or current RCA, then post RCA, and then into your PhD, and kind of start in
The
that way, or
Yeah, the
it's up
journey.
to you. The journey.
We all hate that word, but we still use it.
I know. You know what? I wish there was. I wish I was clever enough. Well, not clever enough, but I wish I was a wordsmith that I can come up with like better words for like sustainable or eco-friendly. And I hate those
Yeah,
words so
I
much.
know. Oh, I know. The transitions, isn't it? I mean,
It
is it?
is. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the name of this podcast again? It's
Transcend
trans
matter. Yeah.
transcend matter.
Matter.
So
Yeah.
it's the transcending of my progress. Well, yeah,
Yes.
we can do some crossover there somehow.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess. Oh, it's hard to know where to start. I grew up in northeast Wales. In a village in Wrexham called Gresford, and I was always growing up. I was always out on walks with my parents and my brother and sister, and enjoying nature and enjoying the countryside because we have easy access to get there.
Mm.
And even as a child, I remember my grandma teaching me about all the different species of trees, and we'd go around picking up leaves, like, oh, what's this from? What kind of, yeah, what species of tree? That's an acorn, but what tree is it from? Going through all that, even from the age of like 4 or 5 upwards, I think it's been ingrained into my, I don't know, into my knowledge from very early on.
Interesting.
And I've always loved it as well. I think my brain must have just been soaking it up like a sponge, because I must have been excited by it. Whether or that's through nature or nurture, I don't know. So whether that's from the people around me being excited about it and then me naturally being excited about it, or whether it's part of who I don't know how to. Yeah, it's
It's hard,
really
isn't it?
strange.
Those sort of
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
So, but then I do remember finding a picture from my second or third birthday, and I had an easel. I had a kid's easel for my birthday, so I don't know whether it is nurture, really. I mean, I could have,
Interesting.
but yeah, I don't know whether I could have been like, might have been given an abacus, and I could have been a mathematician, but we'll never know. So yeah, I think I was just always submerged in nature, which is really nice. And when I moved to Manchester for uni, I think I had a bit of a shock, a bit of a culture shock.
Oh wow. Okay.
And in terms of all the concrete,
Mm.
and just a general lack of trees that I found in the city centre. And I think I really struggled in my first year. I really missed countryside and home
Mm.
and trees. It sounds really lame saying it out loud.
It's not lame at all. It's knowing yourself, which I think is quite
Yeah,
a powerful thing. Like you know what you like and you love nature. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
think we're told to go and live in these big cities because it's the right thing to do, so everything is happening. And that's actually not the
Mm,
case. And we're really lucky we live in
yeah,
the age of like internet, is you know,
yeah.
that we can
And
do stuff like this.
exactly. And for me, I think it helps me to reset, or
Mm.
even the smells and sounds. I don't know how to describe it, but I guess it's been ingrained into me. and I don't have a problem with that. I absolutely love it.
You just resonate. That's your wavelength. You just resonate with that
Exactly.
environment. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I even remember going to Piccadilly Gardens in Manchester, seeing it on Google Maps on my phone, thinking, "Oh, great! I can go and get some nature in Piccadilly
Yeah.
Gardens." And you turn up, and actually, it's a couple of patches of grass and mostly concrete because it's in the city centre. I don't know if you've been to Piccadilly Gardens in
I
Manchester, but
haven't.
it's mostly concrete, unfortunately.
Oh
For
no.
for trees, you're better off. Platfields Park, Fletcher Moss Botanical Gardens. I've learnt now, but a bit further out. But yeah, I think I started focusing my work in terms of connecting it into environmental awareness. I connected that definitely into my work in my foundation degree, but more prominently within my work in second year at Manchester. I was studying BA Textiles and Practice at Manchester School of Art, which is part of Met University, and excellent course as they all are there because I'm doing my PhD there. And in my second year, I started actually going into alleyways in Rusholme, near where I lived, and looking at all the waste that was dumped in those alleyways, and sort of logging what I could find, but also collecting some pieces and rearranging them into installations and actually working with the materials to draw more attention to the sheer amount of waste. And there were signs around stating environmental crime, but it doesn't stop it necessarily happening. But yeah, I found some interesting things there. Dead rats, rat
Oh wow. Okay.
skeletons,
Yeah.
human feces. Yeah, so it was a lot of rubbish. I had to be really careful when working. My
Yeah.
tutors were like, "You are being safe, aren't you? And wearing gloves and taking somebody with you." I was like, "Yes, yes, 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 I am." So yeah, it was. But what was quite interesting is that when I did make some installations and arrangements with those materials, I photographed them, documented them, and then went back to them. And actually, I remember specifically for one, the entire installation had been moved into nearby bins and recycling bins when I went back. So the kind of process of me highlighting these materials and waste in the alleyway did work in the sense that then they got disposed of in the appropriate ways. So yeah, that was part of that. So local, I guess that's what started my local awareness of local waste. And that then moved into looking at local waste within the School of Art itself. And I started collecting all the, well, not all of the waste paper, but a lot of the waste paper within the School of Art, because obviously lots of university art school students create a lot of paper waste.
Yes, they do. Yes.
And so I collected a decent amount of that and took it home to play with and started making new papers, traditional paper making processes, but also mixing it with other biodegradable ingredients. And that led me to accidentally create a new invention of a material which I named biomarble. Yeah, and that's got a UK patent now. So that patent protects the actual making method of the material. But it's great because that even I guess even though a patent does technically put like a secret wall around something like a material, it protects it in the way that you can then partner with an industry, and it's your property, it's your intellectual property. So, for example, I could partner up with a car manufacturer, and we collaborated through knowledge exchange, and my information was protected. So it does allow for industrial production where your work is protected. So it's knowing the benefits and the disadvantages, because you can't necessarily, I guess, share your secrets, but it does allow for your own, I guess, industrial benefit and knowledge exchange, which can be really important.
How hard was how hard was it to obtain that IP? Because materials is so tricky, especially if it's a new invention. It's defining what those parameters are.
Yeah, I
How
know.
long did it take? Did you have to almost, go through several lawyers? How many years did it take?
It did take a few years to officially come through. Um, I remember thinking, okay, maybe I need to get protection on this, because I had so many questions whilst at the university, from people in other courses, tutors in other courses. Oh, how do you make this? Oh, what's this made from? And I was like, oh, I had I had a very brilliant tutor, Kate Egan, who also is mentoring me whilst I'm on my PhD at the moment as well. She was sort of advising me to just say minimal amounts for now. And she
Yeah.
said, remember Vimpto, because Vimpto,
Vimto.
yeah, Vimpto, because Vimpto always kept their ingredients or their process a secret. So it was like Vimpto was our secret word of Vimpto. So I was always thinking, oh, Vimto, 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 whenever everybody would ask me, which is really funny, and I still think it now. But yeah, I had to do a lot of research around how to even go about it, how to even start it. And I think what's really useful for your listeners to know is actually there are intellectual property there's like free sessions. So like advice sessions, they're called pat lib. So it's like short for patent library. So you can get free pat lib sessions through many of the sort of key libraries in the UK. So I used I used a couple of these sessions. You can only obviously have one session, I think, in each one. So I went to Manchester, I went to Liverpool, just to see what both would say. And they both said, "Oh, this qualifies for a patent. This is an invention, because it's a new way of making a marbled paper."
Yeah,
So
nice.
yeah, so there's different, obviously, I guess categories, different characteristics that qualify for each of these categories within the
Mm.
different intellectual properties. There's copyright, design right, IP, which is sorry, not IP, patent, which is invention. And I always get confused between design right or copyright. I can't remember off the top of my head what the official names are, but there's differences. So it's worth checking it out on the IP government website.
Mm-hmm.
And then after these free sessions, I sort of started bullet pointing from advice what I might need within this application. And I actually tracked down a the patent attorney who helped me at Liverpool.
Amazing.
And
Yeah.
because they're not actually allowed to advertise their own company, they do those free sessions on behalf of, I guess, the libraries, and they couldn't. So I was like, this guy's really helpful. So I tracked him down and went to sort of. I did I went around it, I guess, in the most cost effective way for me at the time as a as just a graduate student. So I had some initial advice from this free sessions, wrote a patent application myself, and then paid for a patent attorney to tweak it in the sort of lawyery terms, the attorney patent terms, for it to be appropriate for submitting, um, to the, I guess, the IP deciders. Don't know what their official board is called. So I submitted that in August 2017. And then I think there's sort of like a period where you don't have to submit it to the next stage, but I can't remember how to just like how it worked now, because it was a while ago. But my patent officially came through, I think it was 2020 or 29. I can't remember. This is really bad. It was a few years ago. Yeah, it's just a really useful thing to have, in terms of, I guess I feel like I can talk about it now. But also I think it's really interesting how, for example, when I was doing my master's application, and I had an interview for textiles at the Royal College, I think being able to say I have I've invented a material that is patent pending, um, actually held a lot of weight behind it. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but
Okay.
I think it did help. And I think that's also probably a contributing factor to me getting a scholarship from Burberry as well for the masters. Because maybe, I guess it shows gumption. I guess it shows
traction and moving what your ideas are, etc.
Moving them forward. So I guess it demonstrated that professionalism, and maybe that's also what helped. So I still think that it was worth paying for some advice from a patent attorney to pay for a master's course.
Interesting. It's like the ripple effect of that help.
Yeah, it was like a business decision.
So you were saying how like there's amazing gumption. Well, the gumption, I guess, helped. The traction helped for getting a scholarship with Burberry.
Yes.
But you mentioned that you feel you didn't know how you felt about it, or you weren't too sure why, or if it was. Yeah, that's quite interesting comment.
Yeah, I guess it's because it was all accidental. But I guess that is true, and I do have to remember that actually, and also the first Anna dye was accidental, because it was meant to be a cure for malaria, but it actually created Movine, which was the first synthetic purple dye. But yeah, I think what I have to remember is that the sort of accident only came from a very long process of experimentation and testing, and me being very meticulous and thorough. So actually, it is a result of hard work, and I do have to remember that. But I guess maybe there's guilt there. I feel guilty that I don't know why. It's just maybe I really don't know why that is, because I think, is it really fair that this accident happened to me, and then that enabled me to be able to get a patent, and then enabled me? I guess it's a very privileged position. I know that it's such a prestigious institution, and I just felt very privileged. I think I felt very lucky, very privileged to have that scholarship. But I am a very hardworking person. I always have been. So I have to remind myself that, but then it still makes me feel like weird. Do I
You
deserve
absolutely deserve it,
it?
and I think it's all these things happen to lots of different things happen to people all the time, good or bad or somewhere in between. I think when something
Yeah,
good happens to you,
yeah,
and appreciating that moment and almost like being humble with yourself and having gratitude for that is really, really important. And you absolutely
yes,
have that. You are not
yes.
narcissistic. You are very aware of your um
How do you
you
know? I
might be,
might
yes.
be.
Well, okay, I'm going to be quiet now then. But it's essentially having gratitude.
Well, I've got something to tell you. No.
It's essentially having
Uh,
gratitude, and yeah, and being grateful that yes, you have worked
yeah.
hard, but maybe there's some few things that aligned naturally. So that's really important,
Yes.
I think,
Yeah.
in general. And I feel like you have that,
Yeah.
or maybe not. Maybe there is
Absolutely.
something you want to tell me.
Actually, I just sat around doing nothing for my whole degree. No, I did work hard. I do have to remember that, and I think hard work does pay off.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that this occurred, and but that's where I think a bit of luck was involved. But then people do say there's no such thing as
I
luck.
mean, you aligned yourself into that
So yeah,
situation. You put yourself in that situation for something to happen. So
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes, and then I guess I just ran with it when I had it. I just ran with it and pushed it as far as I could, um, to
mm,
get that pattern. And I guess that's what helped. So yeah, I guess it's grabbing the opportunities, and yeah, just being hopeful, for
yeah,
further opportunities. But it does take a
yeah,
lot of energy as well, I guess, because you have to be behind it all the time, advocating. So yeah, I think it was all very positive, and I am very, very lucky. So I think I did also realize, I did state that actually I don't think I could have afforded to have gone to the Royal College without the scholarship, and that's
yeah.
the case for many
I got a
students.
scholarship. I was
Um,
yeah lucky for that. So
oh, well
I
done.
understand that. Even though I came from industry
Yeah,
back into it, but it's yeah there was no
yeah.
support elsewhere.
Who was your scholarship with, just out of interest?
My oh gosh, you know what? I can't remember now. I think it was part of the RCA. God, that's oh my god, that's
Don't
really
say
bad, isn't it?
that.
I got part funded, and I think it was straight through
Okay.
RCA. I think it was because I had industry
Oh, great.
background, and they
Okay.
were trying to bring in industry people
Yes.
in to kind of inject a slightly
Oh,
different
great.
dynamic to the courses. Oh, that's really
Brilliant.
bad.
No, it's fine. Yeah, you can put it in. You can put it in the description of the
Yes,
podcast
yes,
later.
yes. It's supposed to be
I'd
quite it's
wait.
supposed to be quite a chill podcast anyway, with some like technical details thrown in. So it's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
This is so funny.
Whoever they are,
Yes.
thank you very much to them.
Oh gosh. So how have you found going from MA into your PhD?
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more about your current thesis. Yeah.
Yeah. So my MA came to, so it was 2018 to 2020. And so COVID, COVID obviously
Ah,
happened.
yes, of course.
I applied for, yeah, I think I had an interview or application for my PhD in January or February 2020. It must have been January. And then again, the same sort of situation is that I realized I don't think I could afford to do the PhD, um, and I'd and not work. So I tried to get some funding, for that as well. So I found out that there about the AHRC, the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and the fact that a they have different branches. So the NWCDTP, or Northwest Consortium Doctoral Training Partnership, they fund my PhD. So that again was quite a competitive, rigorous process for applying for that. And again, probably helped that I had a material that at that point was patented or nearly patented. And I had an email through in April 2020 to say that I was successful in getting this scholarship. And I think I was sort of brain frazzled at that point because I couldn't believe it, firstly. Secondly, everything at that point in the arts and humanities was so uncertain that I was so shocked that they were even still offering funding for arts and humanities related things because of what was going on in the world. So again, I felt extremely lucky and accepted that quite quickly because I knew I had something to start in the October. So it was very fortunate. And yeah, I guess in my application and part of my research proposal, I wanted to pair up across the School of Arts, but as well as the Science and Engineering faculty, and see if I could start testing some of the materials that I was creating, and bridge that gap across the arts and sciences. And actually, originally, I was hoping to try and create and test naturally waterproof materials. So things, for example, like our hair, our nails, that's keratin. Obviously, it's waterproof. When we wash our hair, obviously the water doesn't go into our hair strands, our hair fibers. It goes around. And I guess that whole idea of the fact that all of our sort of waterproof barriers that we create up for our materials are all synthetic, and it's so practical, it's so useful. We need our materials to be waterproof, but they're all synthetic usually. But there are naturally occurring waterproof materials, for example, keratin, but also like chitin, which is the exoskeleton of insects. So I guess I really wanted, and cellulose as well, actually, on waxy surface of leaves. So that was my main sort of research proposal, is wanting to develop materials that sort of, I guess, bridged that.
Did you find
gap.
there was different levels of like water resistance and waterproofness? Because they're two slightly different brackets in industry, aren't they? Did you find there was
exactly.
like some materials potentially more suited to being waterproof or more towards the water resistance?
That's a good question. I started looking at local leaves and fibres with waxy surfaces or sort of water resistant surfaces, and I found that obviously the waxier leaves, holly leaves in particular, were so waxy on the top that they were very waterproof. But actually, the most water resistant, I should say, waterproof surface was nasturtium leaves. I don't know if you've ever seen water droplets sit on a nasturtium leaf, but it's absolutely fascinating.
Are they the little circular leaves, aren't they? And they have little red flowers. Yes, and they're called something in folklore. It's like witch's liqueur or something. Oh, yeah, because it pulls and it looks silvery. Am I right? Is this? That looks quite. There's like a folklore about these flowers. Anyway, I can't quite remember the story.
Yeah, and they're edible as well. They're really lovely. You can eat. Yeah, you can eat the flowers as well as the leaves. The leaves are quite peppery. Yeah, so I started growing loads of nasturtium leaves to start sort of. I started creating like little nasturtium leaf shelters and nasturtium leaf objects, and pouring water over them, and it was really fun. But I guess that kick-started me looking at local fibres and leaves, and actually I shifted away from waterproof because I think I realised I needed to be a biochemist, a bioengineer, to really dive deep into that area, and I just didn't have that chemistry background. I have connections within the science and engineering department, but I would need an actual research assistant to help me with that PhD proposal, maybe in future work.
Did you find most of your, well, probably two questions actually. Your research methods are very much more creative, a bit more of a flow state. So you kind of see something happen and then you're like, that sparks another idea and it sparks another idea, which is a very creative process of research. Or do you try to embed something a bit more quantitative and almost like set up a series of experiments with one or two set variables? How do you kind of approach your thoughts?
That's a really good question. And one that I am still figuring out myself. No. So for my methodology, I have sort of like a multi-pronged approach. So I have the design thinking, that idea of like you were saying, responding to materials, the flow of making things that we can't predict. It's that reverse hylomorphic. Reverse hylomorphism.
You know what? I'm not sure what
say.
I need to research that word.
I think if I let me get this right, hylomorphism is when you have a predetermined form and a predetermined material, and you know what you're going to make. And that's Aristotle's. I might be totally wrong here. We'll Google this later. Yeah,
we'll do an update on T's and C's for quite a few of this in the blurb.
Yeah, the reverse hylomorphism is Tim Ingold. So he states that actually you shouldn't predetermine what you're going to make with your materials, and you should just respond to the materials. It's the flow of making, so you see what happens, and that's how we are all I would say that we're encouraged to do that throughout all higher education within 100%. Design and
because
making
it's that
courses.
Flow state that basically represents your identity as a designer and artist.
Yes, exactly. And also this it encourages experimentation. If you say, oh, I'm going to make this with that, then it just cuts out this whole process of development. So that's what I found quite interesting actually across science and engineering and arts and humanities, is that maybe I would say I would love to just go in there into science and engineering, into and just play and just explore. But I know it doesn't work like that, and actually safety regulations wouldn't let me do that. And actually you do have to have a predetermined plan for what it is you're going to test or what it is you're going to do. That might not apply to obviously many scientists who do play and explore and experiment, but there is a certain level of planning that still has to go into that testing. So anyway, back to my methodology. I have that design thinking. The secondary area is the science testing within engineering labs. So it's the, I guess, characterization of materials that I want to test. So particularly strength. So it's the compressive strength of materials that I've created that I want to test. So obviously that's when something gets compressed. And you can also test all sorts of things like flexural strength, which is where you do a 3-point bend test to see how easily it would snap. There's a sort of tensile strength test where you stretch a material. And I say about playing and experimenting, maybe not being as available within the science lab, but then I know my supervisor, Dr. Kirsty Andrews, one of my supervisors, they're all brilliant team supervisors. She has tensile strength tested a crunchy bar. So I know Yeah, exactly. So there's definitely experimentation on Kirsty's part, which is great for me because she's open to a lot of my ideas of testing something. Um, yeah, I'm very lucky that I've got that support network. So yeah, I would say the main one for me is compressive strength and testing, and the reason for that is because one of the resulting materials I've created is a 100% grass fiberboard material from locally foraged grass within Manchester and Greater Manchester, and through sort of like a handcrafted process of making this board and actually compressing within a press mold that I've designed specifically for 100% plant matter, I've got a board that is like a fiber board, and I'm proposing this as potential in a packaging material that could replace something like polystyrene or even cardboard molded pulp. The reason being is obviously polystyrene single-use material. Obviously, we know how bad it is for the environment and how long it lasts, even after its function. So it's not time-matched design; it's everlasting almost. And the impact that polystyrene has. I think we're already shifting away from polystyrene anyway, because we've got lots of starch-based polystyrene type materials. But I guess from my perspective, I'm looking at how we can create those types of materials from local regenerative fibers. Because obviously grass doesn't die when it's cut. It's very fast growing. It's locally abundant. And we find it naturally degrading in our local soils anyway. If you compare that to things like cardboard in a molded pulp, the wood chips for cardboard, that process of obviously the trees are grown but are felled for paper pulp and cardboard pulp. Trees die. The wood chips have to go through chemical processes and mechanical processes to be able to form that sort of slurry, that cardboard slurry, bleaches and chemicals involved. And there's heat process usually involved as well, and binders and glues, other ingredients, often some printing as well, like synthetic inks. Outer cardboard packaging is definitely more synthetic inks and tapes and glues, adhesives. So we think, oh yeah, cardboard's biodegradable. Yeah, great. But actually, what is in the cardboard and what process has that gone through? Is that actually going to be very good for our soil, or could we step that up again and have it as a 100% bio-based material that's actually local plants, regenerative resources, grass. I'm just championing grass. And I love grass. Just the grass that we find in our gardens. Can I make that clear? No other type of grass. Because I know there's other grasses used to describe as, class B drugs, class C drugs, or whatever class that's in, but I like normal garden grass. So yeah, I think
yeah. No, I love it, Journey. So really interesting how you're looking at 100% bio-based matter. What are your thoughts on? And actually, I've got a few questions going back to when we're talking about you want to go into like engineering science spaces and you just want to play. And I really want to hear in a second maybe like your ideas of play within those sort of very controlled environments that we can go back to in a second. But what are your thoughts on biodegradable materials? Are you trying to look at materials that are very short term or long term? What's your thoughts on like the process of that, or even preferably recycled or upcycled? And just one quickly, just push your mic a little bit forward so it's not on the perfect. Yeah, that should be good now. Yeah.
Does that help? Is that okay? Okay. very good questions. Wait,
Yeah,
actually,
of
repeat the
course, that's
questions
okay.
again.
So let's just talk about the biodegradability bit. So bio-based
Yes.
materials are amazing. I'm a huge champion of regenerative materials, especially at some other projects I work on at Rollerback. But what are your thoughts on the biodegradability and the long-term usage of that? Because I know there's quite a few materials out there. You use them once and then you put them on the compost heap, which is great for a compost heap. But then if you think about the amount of energy that's gone into it to make it, actually, should you try to like make that more
Yeah.
long-term? And a lot of biomaterials are quite short-term still, depending. That's quite
Yes, they
quite
are.
broad. So just curious to know
Yeah.
about your thoughts. Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, I guess that all is to do with
Yeah.
application of the material. So, in terms of what I'm specifically looking at with these materials, is what is used for a short term life that is packaging and inner packaging. Obviously, it would be great if we could reuse our inner packaging, um, but a lot of the time things need to be specifically molded to an object or something that we're buying, and actually, yeah, I think it's a really good question because obviously we have these natural
Yeah.
wools that are used for inner
Yeah.
packaging now as well, and it would be great if we could just do a lot more of that, use that more, and actually I have been speaking with Zoe Fletcher, Dr. Zoe Fletcher, who's a
Mm-hmm.
wool specialist, UK wool specialist, um, and we've thought about how we could actually create material from a field-based material, so the wool and the sheep and the grass. It would be really interesting to see the insulating properties of grass, and yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, but yeah, you are right. I think it's all down to
Yeah.
time matching, time match design. So in terms of the bio-based material side, yes, they don't last as long, but where can that be useful? So things like packaging, that is useful because we don't need it for a long time. It just needs to last maybe in storage, but also in transportation, and then we always dispose of it. There's that element of, okay, actually, we could continue making bio-based materials that could be disposable packaging materials, or we could actually look at making bio-based materials that could be reused
Yeah.
as packaging materials, but then they need to be more durable. And there are
Mm.
ways of doing that. Whether or not they would be completely bio-based or not, I don't know, because what I guess the material I'm making is
Mm.
100% grass. So there's no binders, no
Amazing.
natural binders or synthetic
Amazing.
binders. So it is fully biodegradable. I guess the way of making a reusable, I think it'd have to be
Mm.
tested. I and also it needs to be malleable. If it needs to be reusable, it needs to be malleable, and so that the shape can change depending on whatever the object is being packaged. So we kind of need more bubble wrap alternatives. There are obviously starch-based plastic bubble wraps now, which are brilliant. I guess the problem with that is people think they're biodegradable, but they're actually only degradable in certain temperature and moisture conditions. So people throw them onto compost, expecting them to biodegrade, or put them in the garden, expecting it to biodegrade, and they don't. And then end up putting it straight into the bin anyway. So there are those issues with starch-based plastics, but I think the awareness of that is improving,
It's
so that's
super
good.
hard, isn't it? It's like a
Um,
minefield. And like, it's
yeah,
easy for us to say, oh, yeah, that does that, because we've researched and it's like our experience in our
yeah,
area. But it's for the um, average might not be the right word, but yeah, maybe like the average person who isn't exposed to this and their everyday life is something completely different. How do they navigate that?
mm,
And yeah, packaging is a really tricky one.
Yeah.
Super hard.
I think, yeah, exactly. And it does come down to transparency. All the time, it comes to transparency and making sure that it's the origins of the materials and the processes that it's gone through and what will happen after it, what will happen to the material afterwards is very clear to the user, because there is a severe lack of material awareness and process awareness, and all we can do is try and promote that awareness, make it transparent as possible. So many of there are grass-based materials out there at the moment, grass-based cardboards, and unfortunately, from the research that I've found anyway, most of the grass-based cardboard is classed as up to 50% grass content. And that is very vague because that can still mean 1% grass content. Up to 50, what do you mean? Please clarify. Yeah, and what is the rest? What's the other content? We kind of need now to have ingredients on our packaging materials. And that sounds
not
weird,
at all.
I
Not at
know.
all. You get this in textiles. Legally, you have to have like a composition label, and you have to be really specific. And I mean, anything under 1%, you don't have to state, but anything above it, you do.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know. So I think maybe so you say you get that in textiles, but I've not seen that. Who sees that? Is that just if you're in the textile industry and not a user?
I have to be very careful what I say here, but there are some
Yeah.
fibers and yarns that they say they have a percentage of something within it, or it has a content of something, or
Yeah.
it's something based, and it
Yeah.
gives the impression it's 100% in the yarn, but actually it's like 1%.
Yeah.
So let's say that yarn is using 50% of it. It's 50% cotton and 50% of this special yarn, and then 1% of the yarn has this special property. Then all of a sudden, it's not 50%, which it might look like on a composition label. It's actually 1% of that 50%. So it's really tricky wording. Yeah, and it's really hard. You need baby steps for everything. So I understand why something can't be 100% now, because unfortunately we still need to, well, not unfortunately, but we still need to have like commercial standards. And then there's a conversation of like,
yes,
how do we
exactly.
change people's perspectives of like color and interaction? That's a whole different thing. But
yeah,
it's baby steps, but it is clarity and transparency.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating to hear. We kind of need it to be, like in our food. We need some kind of ingredient label.
Yeah. Do you remember when they started that traffic light thing in the supermarkets when you were younger? Do you remember that when that came in? The green, amber.
Yes,
Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah,
Does it work? I don't
yeah.
know.
For you mean for like
Fats.
the saturated fats and sugars, which is always really high on all, because I'm like a chocolate usually.
I'm terrible. That's my one vice is chocolate. I'm terrible. I'm like, yeah, no, so hard.
Yeah, red. Oh, it's healthy.
Fine. I need the glucose in my brain. Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think it'd be really good to have. No, sorry, it's okay. I think it'd be really good to have ingredient labels very clearly stated on everything that we buy, almost. I don't know how that would be doable. I mean, obviously within clothes and things, we have, for example, my jumper right now, 60% cotton, 40% polyester. I didn't even know that. I've just looked now. So there we are. But where the cotton is from, I do not know. Where the polyester is from, again, absolutely no idea. So maybe there needs to be a more detailed approach to ingredients lists for materials for everything. Yeah, that would be fascinating to know origins of where some things come from, even on like I don't know, how would you even do that?
You can,
like a QR code on absolutely everything.
There's some brands who do QR codes, but I think some people might say, why do we need that? But then we know why we need that, because you should have transparency, and then, but also the
Yeah.
kickstart that is to open up in people's awareness to understand where our materials come from, and hopefully create a traction of care. Because I think a lot of people, we care. I know a lot of
Yeah.
people who care, but I know a lot of people who don't care. And, people have different agendas. That's
Yeah.
absolutely fine. Like, if some people
Yeah.
don't really care about where their trash goes, but actually if their trash was in their back garden, then they would care. So it's like to understand, actually, let's say if that
exactly.
cotton came from a certain area of China, or actually it came from this area in Turkey, or I don't know, where have you, then that might start to trigger conversations. So it's just like, how can we initiate these conversations to inspire a movement, which then inspires a lot of trends that inspire funding in certain areas. And it's a mass thing.
It's like a little history log.
History, a passport,
Yeah, it's
material
like
passport is what they usually call them. Yeah.
it is. It's like a passport, or like your ancestry.
Yeah.
But for like an ancestry for a material would be fascinating, because there'd be so many different elements and areas as well, where certain materials or certain dyes have come from, and I bet the materials go on such a physical journey, and transportation, and that would be fascinating.
It's crazy. And manufacturing is a nightmare, because then
but also like the life after you've used it. What happens to it? What is its death? Or how do we prolong its life so that death doesn't happen? Or how can we then deconstruct the fibers? So obviously this is blended, so I don't know what will happen to this, but I know there's research being done to separate blended fibers now, which is brilliant. But even better, it'd be even better if we just don't blend fibers.
No, it's a whole conversation within like monomaterials and taking disassembly applications. But what I was quite interested, actually, what you were discussing earlier, was like play. And I'm a huge fan of play within trying to brainstorm something and work out things. And do you find, or do you feel there needs to be more play within those sort of academic engineering spaces? Or, because you were saying obviously you need to be very careful of health and safety, which is completely understandable depending on what projects you're working on. But do you think that idea of design and our approach to design, which is usually through play and through flow states, and almost like blending that with academia, because I find a lot of designers bring in the idea of like controlling their design experiments with quantitative variables and so on and so forth. That's a very scientific approach. Have you seen areas where play has been brought into academia?
I guess within the School of Art, play and the Design Research Hub at the School of Art, play within academia is definitely championed. So I'm very fortunate to be able to be part of that group. But yeah, I can't really speak for the science and engineering, because I don't really have as much of a sort of connection with the hub of staff or department. I go in through a student route, I guess, a PhD student route, and I create materials that I then play with myself, in terms of I test them in with both the School of Art equipment, and test with a laser cutter, test with CNC, test with drills and woodwork machinery as well. And then I guess me pushing those boundaries of what the material can do, I then think, okay, what can I do in the science and engineering that's going to help me prove something? So I guess it's less. I guess it's slightly less playfulness in terms of creativity, but I guess it's maybe I don't have as much physical access to certain things because I'm not classed as a science and engineering student. I'm classed as a design student, and I have made the sort of connection myself through asking for a science and engineering supervisor and pushing that side of my work myself, which I'm very fortunate that at Manchester Metropolitan University, they have a leading School of Art and Design, as well as a leading science and engineering department. And not many universities have that. So I'm very lucky to be able to bridge across the two. And I'm hoping to continue working that way in the future and just build on that research. So I am lucky because I remember, well, many art schools in London, for example, are art schools. I know that Royal College of Art pair up with Imperial, and I think CSM have started a Grow Lab. So yeah, I do feel lucky that I am able to access these two.
And do you think it's quite important for like the next stage of your work, whether it's just like wrapping up your PhD, because this is your final year now, is it?
Oh no, this is just the beginning.
Oh gosh.
It is my writing up year, but I feel like it's just the beginning of my research and practice, which is really exciting. But I just feel like, I think there is for example, I think for me, I am really trying to assess the entire life cycle of the material that I have created. I know exactly what's happened to this material, and I'm trying to assess what it can do, what its applications are, as well as how will it degrade. So I'm really looking at the full journey of what this material is, and I am in control of every single stage, which is really, I mean, again, I feel really lucky that I can do this. I think for example, a lot of materials that are tested in labs are not necessarily ones that have been made by the people testing them. So I think that, I think I'm just really enjoying the process of that whole sort of life cycle testing.
Yeah, which involves a lot of science side to it, I'm assuming. Yeah.
I think to be able to collect the raw material myself and then make the material with a mold that I've designed specifically, test that material myself and analyze that data, and then see how it could be disposed of or applied. I feel like I can see the whole timeline, everything that's coming into it, the whole life cycle assessment, I guess. But then I'm thinking, maybe we can do this with loads of other materials that I can create. And I guess it's bridging that gap between departments, and I think it's just very exciting.
I'm very excited for you. And do you think, because for me, you're very like holistic, and is spiritual a word I could use maybe? Like with your materials, you're very in tune with your environment, and it's part of your identity, maybe. Let's say we were talking about right at the beginning. Do you think you'll continue that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't think I've ever thought of the word spiritual. I think emotional connection. But it's really nice that you've used that word.
It feels like it's a part of you, which I think for me is quite a spiritual thing. But
it does feel, it is. Yeah, I agree with you. I think ecology has always been a part of my life, and it is part of my work. So I sort of am a weird hybrid across design, ecology. I guess those are my two main sort of Venn diagram, but then there's others that sit as well. Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't need to be just one or two or three. You can have lots of little things going on. Absolutely.
No, there's loads. Nice. Yeah, and it's interesting when you mentioned like human. Did you say human centered or human centric?
Human designed approach, but you can get like planet designed or planet centric.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the term human centered I find that really fascinating, because I would say that to be truly human centered, first and foremost, we need to be earth centered, because earth centered is indirectly human centered, because we need the earth. So to be indirectly human centered, we first and foremost need to be earth centered as our absolute priority.
That's a really beautiful phrase.
Yeah, I know it's a weird perspective.
It's not at all. No.
But I think we wouldn't be here. So we need to be earth centered as a priority first. But I know that's not easy. But that's why I guess I like the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you feel like once you've wrapped up your PhD, this is going to be something that's a really key thing within your practice, isn't it? I feel it's going to continue going. Would you want to stay in research academia or go into industry? Because industry is very tricky to navigate. It's unfortunately, it's very money focused.
Yeah, money focused, as in manufacturing.
Oh, sorry, money focused.
Money.
So
sorry.
if something
yeah.
costs a lot to make, it's very hard to persuade.
I know. Well, yeah, and that's one. Well, interesting, because obviously grass is a free resource. So there's definitely opportunity to go and partner with industry. I definitely want to stay in research, because I think that there's many things within even grass that I could push and actually push with industry. I think I would love, ideally, I would love to be part-time academia and teaching, part-time research.
I can see that.
My dream.
You will make that dream happen, because you know what you want, and you just stay true to yourself.
Thank you. So I now think within the research allocation, push the postdoctoral research, push the development of materials, and push links and partnerships with industry that could actually potentially make it happen. And whether or not that means also pushing IP as well to go into industry, that would be interesting to see if that would come back. I have been sort of advised that maybe one of the molds I've created could be patented.
Amazing.
So because it is designed specifically for 100% bio-based material, raw plant matter, whereas a lot of your other molds that are made for cardboard are obviously made where there's binders and things. So yeah, there's potential for many things. My brain's just popping off now.
And, it's good. I can see you, like, you're the same as me. We're just like la 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 la.
Yeah, just like gonna have like loads of
exactly.
Thing of all the thoughts behind me with the string with notes attached.
I love
and
this.
Post-its.
Yes. Good. I'm glad that's kick-started your brain like this. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. I feel like this has been a really amazing conversation, and I've really loved just hearing your journey, but then also like your just more like holistic approach to materials, opposed to just being about science and we need to make this to do this. It's just like really, really empowering, I guess, to hear. I think be really nice to have some like takeaways for people. I actually sometimes forget to ask people these, but I think it's really useful, especially if students are listening. Just so like any inspirational points, I think, from this summary. So for me, it's just like I felt like it's like persistence and being true to yourself, because you've always been like nature has been part of your identity and you've kept that continuous. So I think that's been quite a cool fact. Anything else you think you can take as a highlight from this conversation? Just like little snippets.
You are right. It is having the drive and the passion, and it is about persistence and hard work, because but also experimentation. Experimentation is so important, because I would class myself as a material explorer. And I think we have to explore not only all those holistic sort of areas that go into what happens in the life cycle of a material, but what a material can be in the future, and how it can be applied in the future. And for example, I don't know whether anybody's going to be willing to accept grass as in a packaging alternative material, but I think the main thing to take from this is that I think demand is changing based on our ecological crisis. I think consumer awareness is changing, and that is very positive, and we can feel more comfortable with being that holistic designer that is very, I think, ecology driven, and earth driven, earth centered.
Yeah, beautiful. That was a great summary. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I loved it. No, it was a really beautiful summary. I think those hybrid designers are like a new breed of designers that I'm really excited to see and semi a part of as well, with like some of my skill sets. But I think it's going to be great. How can people reach out to you? Instagram? I can put all this details on there.
So I have,
if you want people to reach out to you, I'm assuming
of course. So my website is hannahelisabethjones.co.uk. Elizabeth with an S. Hannah is NNAH. And my Instagram is Hannah Elisabeth Jones.
Beautiful. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. It's been really interesting, and I think we need to just keep talking, actually, even after this recording's over.
Yes, definitely. Transcend Matter is a series-based podcast with monthly bonus episodes. We would love you to join our material community, so please do follow us. This will really help spread all the information we have here to a wider audience. We hope you have been inspired and will join us on the next show. This podcast was brought to you by Studio Osmo, bringing together a collection of minds and skills to accelerate future innovation within materials.